everybody, it's Ann. So I had a couple requests to show what I do with batik, so I thought I'd record a video to show you guys how I do what I do. So the first thing that you need with batik is you need probably some good instructions, and I use a couple different books. I use this one and this one, which came with my batik kit, and I'll talk about where I got some of that stuff, and then this one. So any book that's like a good inspiration for a how-to gives you a place to start. I always cover my workspace when I'm waxing with plastic, okay? Because the wax will drip down on the plastic and then it won't mar your table or whatever you're working on. I work right on my wood kitchen table with plastic. I also do plastic underneath my dye surface, and I do a cloth over top like a drop cloth, and that soaks up any extra dye that might be leaking off of there. Now, to actually put together the batik, to actually do the batik itself, you're going to be dripping hot wax onto fabric. And I use an electric kettle, an electric skillet. As you can see, this one's been used over the years, and it's got a little bit of markings on it from my tray where I put my batik wax in, which I'll show you in a minute. It is electric. I plug it in. I can keep it at a constant temperature. It works really well. I think I bought this secondhand, but you can actually get them new if you look around. And then I stick the wax, and I buy all of my supplies from dharmatrading.com online, and I stick the wax, which comes in a tray like this. I stick it inside this, and then I pour water around the outside of this tray, but inside of this. So essentially this is floating on a bath of water, and that keeps it at a good constant temperature, and it doesn't boil out the wax. So that's what I do for that. And then when I'm batiking, I use several different tools. Sometimes I'll use cookie cutters, and I'll use copper cookie cutters with clothespins on them. And then sometimes I'll use tools that are specifically designed for batik. And some of those tools are, let me see if I can find them. Of course I can't find my cantons now that I'm working on it. Some of those tools are specifically designed for batik, and some are tools that I just have around the house. So I use wooden blocks to create shapes like this, okay? You can also use them long ways but you gotta have something to dip it in there. You won't be able to get this close with the wax, it'll burn you. So you need to have like a handle or something on there, a bigger piece of wood. This works well on like thinner fabrics like silk, that sort of thing. And you can see the wax on here. And that works really well on some silk and rayon, and I'll show you guys that. But there are also some very specific tools for batik. And those tools are seemingly not in my box. Oh yes, here they are. So this is called a canting, T-J-A-N-T-I-N-G, it's pronounced canting. And you scoop up the wax in this little hole here like that, and then you draw with it. So that's what makes some of the shapes that I do, or some of the designs that I do. And there's different holes. I guess I have thicker ones than this that allow you to put the wax in and draw something. And then to get it over the top of things, I use like a little plastic lid. And when I scoop up the wax, it wants to start dripping right away. So I'll hold it over that and then go over my design, and then go back over the plastic lid so that way it doesn't drip onto my design. And that's how I do that to keep it from dripping. So there's that. Now once I get to the dyeing part, I use Procyon dyes, and there are specific mixes for this. So there's other things that you mix together in the chemical bath, and then you put together the dye in a dye bath, and then you mix them up. And sometimes I'll mix my dyes in little cups that look like this, so that way I can put lids on them, because the dye bath will stay for about 12 hours or so afterwards, so you can do the dye the next day if you want to do another project, or give it to your kids for tie dyeing, which is sometimes what I'll do. So oftentimes I'll do this. You can also mix up the chemical bath, and it'll stay for 10 days as long as you don't mix the dye and one other ingredient with it. And all the instructions will be in your batik books on how to do some of these things. So that's how I do that. And then in the end, this is what you end up with, and I'll show you a few of my projects. So this is a dress I'm working on right now. It's a slip dress from Ann Normandy Sewing Patterns, and I batiked the individual pieces with some white fabric. So you can see that the design is on there, and I've now rinsed out the wax. It's still a little bit crunchy, but I will actually iron it between pieces of craft paper, not newsprint because the newsprint will mark, but just clean craft paper like used for packing materials. So that's that. And then I used cookie cutters on this one. But you can see here, this is a dress I've had in my closet, cotton and linen. It's a dress I've had in my closet for forever, and I used cookie cutters to make that. I also I used the same cookie cutters to make this silk scarf. And I often use other tools, like I said, the wooden blocks and things like that, to create other designs. But it only really works on thinner fabrics. but these pants I did, and you can see I batik the design on the bottom just using wooden squares, and then I created this, I guess you could call this diagonal design here on the corner just by twisting the block and dropping it down. And you can see it's got some, you know, dye drips and things like that, but that's the beauty of it. The nice thing about this wax is it cracks when you put it in cold water. So before you dye, you always dip your item in cold water and get it soaking wet, and then you squeeze it out, and then you dip it in your dye, and that helps the dye adhere. And that cold water cracking is what creates this. So that creates that typical batik look. And these are a pair of wide leg rayon pants, like that. Rayon and silk dye beautifully. Rayon probably dyes the best in terms of color uptake and how it turns out. But I've done a lot of really beautiful silk scarves, and these are done with silk painting. And what I've done here is I've actually stretched it out on a piece of piece of wood, like a wood frame, if you will. You can even take an old picture frame, and you can take the glass and everything else out of it and just leave the wood picture frame, and then you can pin the with little thumbtacks, you can pin your silk scarf, and then you can actually draw the design on it suspended, and then you can draw the wax on it. And sometimes I'll use little cups like this to mix my wax or my dye in, and then that way I can dye paint on it. And then you use something called Afterfix to paint over the whole thing. And then no matter what you do when you dye, you're always sticking your garments back in Ziploc bags to control the dye process for about 12 to 24 hours afterwards, and that helps set the dye in here. So just like when you were in camp and you did a t-shirt and you were sent home with this, and your mom was told to wash it out the next day, it's exactly what you're doing with the dyeing here, is you're controlling the wax by not letting the chemical bath get rinsed out right away. If you rinse out the chemical bath right away from the dye, it won't take. So that's what you need to do, especially with darker colors, up to 24 hours. So that's what I do with those. So you can see that there's a lot of creativity and fun in batik. It's not a hard craft. It does take a little bit of setup. I have a box that I use here that I keep downstairs in my basement when I make things, but it's a fun craft. It's easy to do, and it's very enjoyable. So go ahead and give it a shot. Get some books. dharmatrading.com is a place where I get a lot of my supplies. You can also use RIT dye like you buy at your craft store. That works great too. There's no mixing or anything. You just go ahead and use their color formulas. Their dye works just as well, and it's often easy for beginners to get started. So really all you need is that double boiler, which is key for the hot wax. And if you do that, and you're all set, you can go ahead and get started.